Okay, awesome. Yeah, so today I'll be presenting. My name is Akim. I'm part of the review board, and my lovely partner for today will be Michelle.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. Okay, sure. Yeah. So, hello. We are part of the review board team. There are 7 students and 3 mentors on our team, and we're composed of Cynthia, Jordan, Sandy, Michelle Aubin, Akim, Matthew, and myself. I'm also Michelle, and our mentors are Christian, Mike, and David. So a really brief intro into review board. What it is basically a web-based review tool that lets developers submit review requests as they work on their code. So reviewers can see, comment, and provide feedback on other people's code, as well as pull patches of their code to test it on their local machines if they choose to. Since it's an open source tool, it's really great for students who are just dipping their toes into industry practices or corporations that want to use and develop open source software. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So these are just some examples of what the code review tool our code review tool looks like on review board. So this is just a screenshot of all the review requests that are currently being worked on by different authors. And this is another screenshot of a detailed review request view where you can see the description of the code that's being worked on and the actual code change if you click on the diff in the top right, and any reviewers that have given feedback on the code. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, as part of the review board, all of the students were working on independent projects to improve or extend the functionality of the review board. So I'm going to be going over a couple of them right now. So the first project is actually my project. So it was the review UI for SVG vector graphic files. The main goal of the project was to add ability to zoom in and out and span SVGs without loss of quality, and also add UI elements to facilitate the use of new methods. So the way you can think of it is SVGs have a very handy thing called viewbox. You can think of it as a viewport. So what you can do is you can manipulate the viewport to make the image seem bigger without actually changing the size of the image. So in this case, if we decrease the viewport as seen by the image, the parrot becomes much larger. But in reality, we haven't actually changed anything in the image itself. And so this is a quick demo of how it actually looks. So the dragging, zooming, everything can be done on using the mouse, and also the UI elements like buttons are available to switch between actual scrolling and zooming in into the image as per usual. Yeah, so I'll just play it back at 2x speed real quick. Yeah, and everything, as you can see here, is actually without loss of any kind of quality, just because vector SVGs are vector files, and therefore increasing scaling them does not actually lose any kind of quality, right? So that was the review UI for SVG vector graphic files. Next up is lazy load collapsed review content by Cynthia. She implemented the lazy loading of collapsed review content, added a mouse over event listener on the content expand button for quicker reaction, and also speeded up the client side for larger review requests with lots of history. The way she has done it is, so if you hover the mouse around the expand button, the request will be sent to the server, which will trigger an immediate content loading function. And then this will load all the relevant information. So this should greatly increase the speed of loading the review content, especially the large ones. Okay, awesome. So the next project is Defects and Go, and the author is Jordan Wang Bruel. So Defects is a new standard for adding metadata and parsing rules for unified diff files. He implemented a defects library for Google's Go programming language. So throughout the semester, he created all of the different structs and functions that would need to be used for reading and writing defects files, and was able to implement a reader module so that you can parse and iterate through defects files. Cool. So this is so it's in the project itself, it's just a module that creates a reader object along with an iterator. There isn't anything too exciting to show. This is a screenshot of what a diffx file might look like, and the Go diffx module provides a way to read this file as an input, iterate through the different headers, and extract relevant information. Awesome. Okay. The next project is the mapping file extension to syntax highlighters by Michel Aubin. So currently when we show files for the diff viewer, we're applying syntax highlighting to them by using a third-party module called Pigments. This takes a file and generates HTML to add colors and formatting around parts of the source code. Pigments tries to determine the right lexer, a class that understands that type of file like .py or .last file for the file type, but sometimes it gets it wrong. For example, our .last files sometimes get mapped to the wrong lexer. So she implemented the backend logic for this setting and the UI for customizing the mapping from Review Board's admin setting page. In the process of implementing the UI, she ended up improving an existing giblets widget that previously handled UI for editing a list of string values. Now the widget can work with a list of any type of values and not just strings, which allows her to use for the mapping of file extensions to syntax highlighters. So I believe there's a little showcase. So the top picture is an example of the UI for editing the mapping of file extensions to syntax highlighters. In the example, we're mapping the Python files to Markdown syntax highlighting. The bottom picture shows a Python file in the diff viewer that has Markdown syntax highlighted applied to it. So yeah, pretty handy, allows the review request to be way more readable. Okay, I think.
Yep. The next project is done by Sandy, and it's the optional color output for RBT diff. So originally, RBT diff is a command line tool that doesn't have that shows you the differences in code that you've added or deleted in your review request, and it originally doesn't have any color highlighters, and his project was to add colored highlighting to make the additions and the removals more clear. Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
Thank you. So the first thing he did was actually address a bug where longer commit messages that wrap around one line actually don't wrap around properly. They just go beyond the width of the container. As you can see in the top, screenshot there, it just continues on. So the bug was resolved by adjusting the rules for handling white space so it's able to wrap, and it was just a way for Sandy to get acquainted to the project. Next slide. As for the actual project, you can see on the left that originally RBT diff, which is similar to like the command git diff in the console, that it doesn't show colored highlighting for the differences that you've made in your code. You can see the little plus signs for code that you've added and the minus signs for code that you've deleted. After the implementation, you can see that on the right, the green is code that's been added and the red is the code that's been removed. Sandy used the Pigments library, which is a Python syntax highlighter, and there's 4 components that work together into highlighting a piece of code, which compose of lexers, filters, formatters, and style. So specifically for this feature, he used diff lexer, diff x lexer, and terminal formatter. To ensure that the features function properly, he's also added quite an extensive suite of test cases. Next slide. So the next project is the emoji picker UI, which Matthew worked on. So the project involved creating an emoji registry that contains the mapping for all emojis, as well as an emoji picker UI, which lets users select emojis from a pop-up window. And he has a extension project that lets administrators upload custom emojis for users, which guides nicely into the project that I was working on, which I'll get into later. But essentially, next slide, please. Essentially, what this project does is that you're able to see that on the bottom right of all text boxes, there's a little emoji button. And if you click it, the emoji picker opens and closes. And by clicking any of the emojis, it'll copy the respective shortcode. So for example, like colon, smiley face, colon, and it will copy it onto the text field and it'll be rendered. Next slide. So you can see that for the actual emoji picker, and that's the emoji picker UI. And what he's learned through this project is that, sorry, my internet connection is kind of bad. Okay, so what he's learned through this process is how to develop Python, develop web projects in Python environments, and how to use it for full stack applications as well as to test. And of course, writing high quality code is reasonable so that other people can work on it in the future. And lastly, this guides nicely into my project, which I was doing the custom emojis dashboard. Essentially, it's a new feature that allows admins to upload custom emojis, which includes a name, a short code, a description, and an image of the custom emoji that they wish to upload. And of course, the feature has to include the ability to upload, load/edit your emoji, as well as save it, and to render a little picture of the emoji as a preview. Next slide. Thank you. So the way it works is that the user entered data is parsed by a Django form, and it's handled by several custom Django widgets. And from there, the text data is saved into site load a page. It will also fetch the data from site configuration, so you can see all the emojis that you've created in the past and edit them if you wish. And of course, you can save it. The image files are a little bit more complicated because they are passed through another custom widget and they are saved into Django's default storage module. And during reload, it's fetched and loaded from default storage, but the rendering is a little bit tricky. So we're still working on it. So as you can see from the screen, any admin wishing to, it'll just stay there until you choose to delete them. And some things that can be continually worked on and improved is that obviously the most obvious implementation would be to render the emojis properly, render the preview of the emoji properly, because right now it's rendering as like a byte stream, which is not an actual preview. So that's something we're working on, and a little bit of error checking to make sure that the user is entering appropriate data into those text fields. Next slide.
Right, awesome. So throughout the whole project, we learned a lot of things. Mainly, we learned how to familiarize ourselves to contributing to open source, as well as web development skills, Python development, and Golang. We've also learned a lot about industry practices, independent work writing, and writing easily understandable code so that others can continue your work in the future.
There's a lot of takeaways because our team is quite large. So we are just trying to give a brief summary of how everyone seems to have experienced this project. So some of the challenges that we faced was understanding the projects thoroughly, and of course doing independent research and learning to understand web dev as well as each of the projects, because a lot of us were new to web development. And working on open source as well as industry projects requires a lot of testing and updating outdated or missing documentation, which is often more important for continuity of a project than it is for personal projects or little things that we work on for school. So for me personally, I know that I was a hot mess in the first half of the semester. I was writing all kinds of code that really served no real purpose. And I was all over the place. So after midterm review, I met with one of the mentors and wrote a renewed planning doc for the rest of the semester. And I was incredibly stressed for about a solid month and then made a lot of progress. So it worked out, so it's okay. But it definitely made me realize that I should have asked for guidance in that sphere earlier, because the mentors are there to help you. So thank you, Christian, for many late nights as everyone else in the Slack channel had to listen to Slack notifications at 4 a.m. And of course, in a weird way, this simulates a lot of the challenges that are faced in the industry environment. And that's definitely something that's important to learn before approaching a project like this again in the future. Lessons about being independent and resourceful and things like that. So can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So like overall, everyone on this team is very happy and grateful for the opportunity to have worked on review board. So a big thanks to all the mentors for guiding so many of us, I should say, for guiding so many of us through like 7 different projects essentially while working on this on their own as well. So I hope they'll continue to be mentors for other students in the future, because this has been a really good learning experience. Even after putting up with me this semester, I hope they won't quit. I know we all learned a lot, and hopefully some of us will stay to work on review board in the future after this course ends. Sweet. Are there any questions?